Bible has much to say about this idea of seasons. It's something that helped me immensely years ago when I began to realize that God has seasons of our life. We have these seasons that He takes us through, and God is working in the seasons. But if we don't understand seasons, we'll live a life a lot of times of with great despair and great discouragement. And so I want to talk with you about how can you be victorious between the seasons, in the seasons, out of the seasons. And I think the story of Joseph is a wonderful example of lessons to help us gain victory in these kinds of seasons. The Bible has a lot to say about seasons. It uses that kind of terminology to help us understand the work of God in our life and in the world. For example, Daniel 2:21 uses this phrase. It says, He changes times and seasons. He goes on to say, He removes kings, He sets up kings, He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Here's the first thing that I would say. This isn't on your outline, but that verse reminds us that God is in control. We sometimes think, well, God must not be in control. And we look around our world right now and we say, is God in control? And the answer is God's in control of all the seasons. He changes times and seasons. Then Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, for everything there's a season. For everything there's a season. There's a time for every matter under heaven. Here's what that teaches us. It teaches us that God has a plan. God is working a plan. God has a plan. And the seasons are part of that plan in our life. Then 1 Thessalonians 5:1, it says, now concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, you have no need to have anything written to you. This teaches us that some seasons are pretty obvious. Nobody has to tell you that this is just a season. Some seasons are very obvious to us. And then Psalm 1:3 says, He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in all He does, He prospers. Some seasons are very obviously fruitful seasons. There are some seasons, we know that from the general harvest of crops. We know there are seasons when the crop, we can see it. But even when we can't see it, it's working underground, behind the scenes. Well, some seasons we can see. We see the fruit. It's very obvious. We know that. We generally say this is a good season. Then Galatians 6:9 says, and let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. This teaches us and reminds us that there is a season for reaping. That season is ahead generally, but we're told don't give up because you don't see the obvious fruit or crop. Don't give up. Stay at it, because if you continue, he says, there will be a season of reaping. And then 2 Timothy 4:2 says, preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Now, here's what we learn from that, and that is that God calls us to be faithful when it's easy to be faithful and when it's not easy to be faithful. In season and out of season. And then Acts 1:7 says this, God said to them, it is not for you to know times or seasons that the Father has fixed by His own authority. And here's the thing I would share with you about that teaches us that all seasons require trust. Some seasons are obvious. Some seasons of our life are not very obvious. What is God up to? What is He doing? But all seasons require trust. The idea of seasons in the Scripture helps us then grasp the fact that everything is working on God's agenda and not on ours. And so, because that is true, it's also true that some seasons in our life are very clear, while others are vague, and sometimes we feel like we're living in between the seasons. I'm not even in a season because it may feel like God is silent or God is quiet. But all seasons are His seasons, and He is in control of all seasons, and consequently, we must trust Him in all the various seasons. Now, in sports, we talk about the off-season. We talk about that a lot. Right now, in this state in particular, we talk about off-season for football teams. There are a lot of other sports going on that are in their season, but we talk about what's going on in the off-season. And the fact is, in the off-season, it may appear like, well, there's really nothing happened. This isn't the season. This is the off-season. But the fact is, there may be as much, if not more, going on in the off-season than what you see in the season. The season is the result of the off season. Now, if sports teams can get that, how much more so is it true in our relationship with God? That just because we don't see the season, all the fruit right now, does that mean that God is not at work in the off season? Well, to ask that question or to phrase it that way answers the question. And that is that God is working in the off season in our life. And so we need to understand what's going on. And I think Joseph is the perfect example to help us understand how to have and live the victorious life for God when the seasons change in our life.